Every year, about 250,000 people walk the Camino. Today, I'm here with Lydia B. Smith, who is an expert on that, and she's going to talk to us about her personal journey and the journeys of others.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Well, the Camino has been around for ages. It's been around since more or less the year 800, and it's what's known as the Camino is the Camino Frances, which runs from the border of France and Spain all the way across northern Spain to the city of Santiago de Compostela, where the remains of St. James are said to be buried.
Okay, and am I correct in saying it's about 500 or 600 miles?
Yes, 500 miles
Okay.
is that particular section. But the Camino itself is really any route that goes to the city of Santiago de Compostela.
And how did you become interested in the Camino?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. I lived in Spain for about 6 years in high school, college, and I found myself in a transition phase in my life. I was in between jobs, relationships, and homes, and I wasn't really sure where I was going or what I was going to be doing. And I'd always known about the Camino since I'd lived in Spain for so long. And just this little voice was like, you need to go do the Camino. And I was like, huh, okay. And I started checking things out, and I went to a little talk, and I read some books, and I was like, I'm gonna go do the Camino. So within a couple of months of the idea coming to me, I was on the Camino, and that was in April, May of 2008.
Wow, and so were you overwhelmed at the thought of it, or did you plan it out? Did you stay in a tent, a hotel, or how did you?
I stayed in what's called pilgrim hostels, which are called albergues. And I did a fair amount of research, but I didn't plan anything out. I really kind of just took it one step at a time, and it was a big adventure, and it was very exciting, and it really was such an incredible life changer for me in every manner you can imagine.
Could you give me a couple examples of it?
Well, the biggest one is, I mean, I've been in the film business for, gosh, almost 30 years. And spent most of my career supporting other people's visions. I mean, I was a great producer. I mean, you want an elephant here tomorrow, it's like, okay, I can do it. But I would say I didn't really trust that what I thought was important was worth shooting and worth making a documentary about. And so it really was a chance for me to step into my full potential. Both as a human being and as a filmmaker. Because this was my first feature-length documentary that I both produced and directed. I had produced and directed some shorts, but not a feature.
Okay, so that was interesting that you got to do that about something that you were really passionate about.
Yeah, well, it was interesting because there was a part of me that was really reluctant. Because what happened is, as I walked, people found out I was a filmmaker, and they'd say, oh, you should do a documentary on the Camino. And I was really resistant, and that was for a couple of reasons. The first was because I had made an independent documentary years before, and it was so hard to do it without the support of a station or a TV or a production company. And then the second reason was, for me, the Camino was so sacred and so magical, I wasn't sure I could do it justice. So I was really resistant to the idea of doing a documentary on the Camino. But just as I was called to walk, I really felt like I was called to make this film. And it felt like everything that had happened in my life led me to that moment of making the film. And I had lived in Spain for 6 years. I was bilingual. I had produced lots of documentaries. I was a camera assistant for many years, so I really knew a lot about cinematography. And I was a spiritual practitioner. So it was kind of like everything was like came together, and it made me realize, well, maybe I really should do this.
So you have all the elements on both sides, spiritually and technically.
Exactly, and I love hiking and I love walking, so that to boot.
I was gonna say, that's probably a positive, because I think a lot of people, me included, would be like, no, I don't know about that.
Yeah, well, but we actually, when we shot, I walked the entire Camino on my own in 2008. And then I went back a year later in 2009 and shot. And I had 2 separate camera units, and we had a van. Because what we would do is we would follow one pilgrim for a morning, interview them, do B-roll of them walking or having lunch, and then we'd get in the van and go find another pilgrim.
Okay. What would you say, is there like one specific reason that most people walk the Camino, or does everybody kind of have their own personal journey?
It really, I think there's as many reasons as there are people doing the Camino.
Okay.
And one of the things I really like to emphasize to people is that there really isn't one right way of doing the Camino. I think it's really about finding your way and finding what works for you, because what may work for you may not work for me.
Okay.
And it's really about each of us finding our own way. And I think it's just a great metaphor for life, really, that to each his own. I mean, you may love to get up at 6 a.m. and meditate and then start your day, and you go to bed at 10, and I get up at 7:30 and meditate then. I mean, it's to each his own.
So everybody's kind of on their own schedule who does the Camino, sort of?
Well, to a degree. I mean, there's really, some people like to get up really early and get out at dark. I was always, not always, but almost always the last one out.
I would say on average, how many days does it take for people to complete the walk?
People usually it usually takes most people between 30 to 40 days.
Okay. Would you say that out of most people that do it, after they do it, they change their life somehow, or maybe they're internally changed, but do you see they make external changes as well?
That's a great question. I think everybody comes out changed in one way or another. I've met literally thousands of people that have walked the Camino, and I would say I've only met one that just said, it was okay. Everybody else said it was life-changing, and I know for a lot of people it inspires them to do even little things like clear out the clutter in their lives, let go of the things that they're not using, recycle them, let somebody else use them. That's a really common one.
Lydia, what are the technical aspects of walking the Camino?
Well, usually most people walk about 10 to 12 miles a day, but there's obviously a big variety there. I mean, you can walk as little or as much as you want. There's little villages, usually every 2 to 5 miles between each other, and each of these villages has what's called albergues, special pilgrim hostels, where people can spend the night. So it really is a great thing that you can learn to listen to yourself and listen to your body. Yeah. Do I need to have a short day today? Do I need to stop here? Do I need to keep going on?
Okay, because I was curious about that. You know, does everybody, are they all on the same course, that get up at the same time every day and stop at the same night, and you guys all meet up at the...
Well, what does develop is people do develop a what we call your Camino family, the people you keep running into. And that's not a set thing, it just sort of happens. You end up finding a group of people that sort of have the same pace. And you may not spend every night in the same albergue, but you keep running into each other. And it's a really, I joke, it's just like your own family. There's people that you love and love to spend time with, and there's people that you love and just need to see only occasionally. But when you see them after walking in for a month and you run into them in Santiago in the plaza, I mean, it's just such an amazing reunion if you haven't seen one of your Camino family for 10 days or something.
Do people either take a tour guide or kind of do it on their own?
There's lots of different ways to do the Camino. You can go with a full-on tour with a bus, and that can pick up people. You can also go with a self-guided that books your accommodation. And I'd say probably the most common is people just go on their own. They go with a guidebook. There's a really fantastic guidebook called Camino Guides by John Brearley, which is what I used when I walked and when we shot. And what was so great about that's also, it's not just a logistical guidebook, but it's a spiritual one as well. Like, what does it mean to be on pilgrimage? And he has practical and mystical information. And some of the days it's like, things like, what's the weather may be raining outside, but what's going on inside, and how do you shift that?
Did you keep a journal by any chance? Or
I sure did. Okay. Yeah. And I took probably like 3,000 pictures. And that was one of the things, was I had no intention of doing a film. And as I mentioned, I was so resistant to the idea. But what happened was I came home and I had about 3,000 pictures, and I put together this really elaborate slideshow and showed all my friends. And this little voice was like, you need to do a film, you need to do a film, you need to do a film. Finally, I was like, okay, shut up, I'll do it. And here we are 7 years later.
7 years later, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess another question I have is, do people share why they went? Like when you call it your Camino family. Do you guys kind of discuss in between you, like, why I'm doing this, why are you doing this? And
it's amazing the intimacy that happens on the Camino. I mean, people generally do share why they're walking, but there's something that really happens on the trail where people just open up and connect so much more. I was just talking to a guy this morning, and you can walk with someone for 2 hours and you'll know them better than your neighbor that you've known for 30 years. And there's just this openness where people share, and what connects us and the things we have in common become more important than the things that separate us. I mean, it's one of these things, like what we do for a living isn't important, what our status is, how much money, all those things that keep us apart in regular life sort of just slip away on the Camino. And it really is, are you kind, are you caring, are you connecting with me?
that's what I wondered, like how many things dissipate and then how much intimacy becomes involved.
Yeah, and I don't know, I can't put my finger on it, but I think there's just something from literally millions of people going before you with an intention of creating a better life, being a better person, that has an impact. I mean, I can viscerally feel it when I'm on the Camino.
Thank you so much, Lydia, for being here today. I've enjoyed this so much, as I myself did not know about the Camino, and I'm sure this is going to help educate thousands and hopefully send them on their own spiritual journey.
No, thank you for having me.